Let's make a video, hey? Let's make a video together. Video power. Whoa, what happened there? What's going on there, buddy? You alright? You cool? Yeah, you get over it. You'll be alright. Hey guys, what's up? It's Darkmec here and welcome back to another video. It's been a while. There's been some stuff going on and that's led me to wanting to make this video to talk to you about my feelings inside about what's going on in the game at the moment, and just where I'm at, basically. So there's been a lot going on, sort of. 9.1 was announced. That's cool. But for the first time ever, I find myself really struggling to want to log into retail WoW. So I wanted to make this video, give my thoughts around the game at the moment, and the situation that I find myself in, and maybe that some of you are in the exact same position, and just go from there. I want to start off, it's not a retail bash video, it's not a Blizzard bashing video, it's just how I'm feeling at the moment, and I don't by any means think that Shadowlands is necessarily a bad expansion. I think the systems in Shadowlands are bad, but you know, class design, playability, the storytelling, the zones, the raid, you know, I think Blizzard should be absolutely commended on their work for that. But the systems, I think, are absolutely terrible and ruining at least my experience at the moment. So if you have different opinions, sweet. Hopefully we can have some good discussion in the comments below as we go through the video. So I've been playing TBC for about 90% of my WoW allocated time since it launched. And that wasn't even something that I had planned on doing. But since I've really fallen in love again with that form of that WoW had taken during that time period and how the game itself functioned. As I mentioned at the start, since the first time ever, since 2005 that I've been playing this game, I have not wanted to log into retail. I've logged in once a week to do a key, and that's it. And that's huge for me. Like, I have been a Blizzard fanboy through and through. I've always jumped to the defense. I've always managed to have fun in-game regardless of content drought, what was in patches or lack of patches. I have always managed to have fun. But Shadowlands has really fallen short for me in that regard. And I the only thing I can really pin it to that I think is just how convoluted the systems that are underpinning the entirety of the expansion are. It took about 204 days I think for 9.1 to come around, and it still may even be rushed, and COVID is certainly a factor in that, and I think the developers need to be praised for all their efforts that they're doing there. But as I said, even through content droughts, I've always managed to have fun. Hello WoD. WoD was one of my most enjoyed expansions, but you know, it had a longer content drought than 9.1 did by 3 days. So I started thinking about what's changed in the game or what's changed for me. So I'm going to come back to that. I just want to pivot for a second. Pivot! And I just want to share some experiences that I've had from playing TBC, which has basically led to this video. And then I want to tie that back into the what has changed part. So please keep in mind as I go through all of this, these are just my opinions and you can absolutely have different ones. I'm not claiming that I speak for a large majority of the player base or anything like that. This is just from a guy that spent way too much time playing this fucking game. So, I'm going to talk about the leveling experience in TBC. So, my time in TBC has been really interesting. I wanted to start off with leveling because it was something that I'd completely forgotten all about. It's long. Like, it's really long. As a filthy casual gaming dad these days, I find I get about 1 to 2 hours a day on average to sit down and play. Sometimes on a stream night, I might get up to 3 hours, but that's generally about it. Now, a level in the Burning Crusade Classic from about 64 onwards starts taking, or it took me, anywhere from 6 to 8 hours to complete. Now, I might be really slow, but I found that depending on how quickly I could find people to progress on group quests, my knowledge of those quests, if I joined a slow dungeon group, if I was getting ganked, which, you know, thanks to everyone on stream who killed me and then came to say hello afterwards. I actually really enjoyed those encounters. what class you're playing. There's lots of variables in that. However, taking this long in each zone, I started to get a real sense of appreciation, and maybe that's not the right word, for that zone. When I was questing, I basically had to clear out a zone before I moved on to the next one due to the amount of XP that was required to move on to the next level. And from that, it made everything feel bigger. So I would have to go from one end to the zone to the other. I'd have to take slow flight paths. And yes, it was time consuming. Some of it was annoying, but it made leveling be its own experience again, not just a speed bump on the road to max level. And I'll be honest, I'd completely forgotten what that was like. In my head, it's just full of retail leveling these days and memories of that. So there's two extremely different experiences here. Now, I always used to say that retail quality of life around leveling was phenomenal. I don't have the time to spend, as I've just outlined to you, to do this kind of stuff. I don't have time to sit in a zone and spam looking for a group to finish this quest and things like that. And in some cases, they're absolutely valid points. However, I kind of feel like that view of leveling not was the wrong one, because there's no right or wrong here, but I'd really removed myself from leveling was an experience and something to enjoy to something that just had to be done as quick as possible, and these things were getting in my way. So I've really enjoyed the leveling process in TBC. It's been a really nice change. If you're not on stream, you can put a playlist on, you can just chill out and go through the zones, and it's actually really cathartic. I had a great time leveling. Now, some people have ults, and who on earth wants to do that on their main and then play an ult? Not about that, completely understand it. So, what I would actually like to see is that, if you had the leveling experience on your first tune through that expansion, and you got, this TBC kind of leveling experience, and then when you reached max level, then you would unlock, XP booster 2000, and you would get a much more retailified version of leveling. So you would still get that leveling experience the first time you went through the start of the expansion, but then after that you would have much quicker catch-up XP boosts on ults that you wanted to bring through the expansion. And I'm not even saying that I want 4 to 6 hours or 6 to 8 hours per level in a retail expansion. We could, if we meet in the middle between what TBC leveling is now and what retail leveling is now, it would be nice to push that leveling experience sort of back into being an experience rather than a rush through. I give credit to Shadowlands. I think Shadowlands did a great job around the story and leveling this time, and it was certainly more investing. I just think it needs to go back to being its complete own experience. So when you reach max level, that in itself feels like an achievement. You had to work hard at that. It took time. It didn't take, launch goes off, I sit on stream for 12 hours and then I'm max level. TBC, I think it took me 2 weeks. So when you get there, you feel like you've done something. Talent trees. I fully get that generally the majority of people end up putting the points into the exact same things, cookie cutter builds. I get it. However, talent trees just feel better. There's something about getting a level that you've grinded for the last 4, 6, 8 hours, and then you get to put a point into something, and then that point makes you feel slightly more powerful. That's a cool progression. It carries a different feeling than just picking one of 3 choices on a row. I think in some cases as well with talent trees, you get the ability to diversify, experiment, and have different options around your spec depending on certain fights, class options, or what you're trying to achieve, which you don't get the same flexibility from the 3-row pick. So talent trees, it's a small thing, but talent trees, when you spend, the day looking at them, they just look nicer. It has a nicer appeal than the talent rows. What I wouldn't give to go back there, will that ever happen? Probably not, but it's just something that's resonated in me as I've gone through the leveling process in TBC. The social aspect. This might come as a surprise to you, but I'm generally not a fan of people. I generally don't like people. Group quests in-game, however, force you to find people on the same quest line to be able to progress through the story. Now, WoW feels like it's become very solo-orientated in its retail format. You don't, unless you want to do Mythic Plus, Arena, raids and things like that, the game has a whole bunch of solo content it now caters for. And that's fine. But the social aspect in TBC with no group finder and things like that, which I've always been a huge fan of because it cuts down on time. However, looking for group channel is so busy, it actually doesn't generally take that long to get a group going anyway. So aside from the teleporting to the dungeon function via the dungeon finder tool, that's kind of much of a muchness. There's just a far greater social aspect going on in the older style games than there is in the retail one. Now, when you find someone to do a group quest with, and it's a whole group chain, and you end up spending an hour with that person, you've spent time with a stranger. You haven't done anything spectacular, but you finished your quest chain. You fucking did it. And that feels awesome because you've got past this hurdle and you can now move along to something else. And it sounds dumb, but that feels really cool. And that goes into that leveling experience because, you know how much of a pain in the ass it was to find a group for that quest. And I've been going through zones and someone's been spamming, looking for more for this quest that I took forever to find. And I'm like, I'm just going to go and help that person because I knew how much of a pain in the ass it was. So that's really cool. Gearing. So this is a tricky one, I admit. I love how simple TBC feels around gearing, and I'll go more into this when we hit the borrowed power section, but gearing feels awesome in TBC. Dungeons have normal and heroic. There are certain items that drop from the heroics, but otherwise there's no change. Then you have raiding and you have arena. So it's a very simplified form of Warcraft, which we don't have now because the game has so many layers and so many other areas of complexity. You've got raid single target AoE, Mythic Plus single target AoE, you've got arena, speedrunning, the list goes on. So there's so many layers applied to WoW now, and so many different levels of gear. You've got 4 versions of the raid. You've got PvP gear separation, you've got Mythic Plus. It gets harder to balance out, and I fully understand that, but I think that's where half the problem has actually stemmed from. It's become so convoluted, and there are so many different sources and uncontrollable RNG factors that go into it. It just doesn't feel as good as when it was in a simple form of how you obtain gear. Now, I'm not saying that 2 bits of loot in a 40-man raiding classic was great. But you killed a boss and you got a piece of loot that was a certain eye level and there was no fluctuation on that. For example, on the other end, it took me 200 days to get a 226 blood spattered scale on my DK. 200 days to get a trinket that was 226 item level, and the only way I could obtain it was from RNG from my Great Vault. That's not a great feeling. So TBC introduced Badges of Justice, and they have several good items on that vendor, which is a fantastic concept. And we had it in Legion as well with the vendor. I can't remember what the vendor was called, but that vendor where you could, if you were chasing a trinket like an Arcano crystal, you could roll a trinket. Now you would get RNG on that trinket that you roll, but you could target a slot. That was amazing. I love that form of content, and I would much prefer to see that come into, you raid, you kill a boss. You have item drops, you also get currency. Mythic Plus, finish your dungeon, you get drops, you get currency. PvP, you get your drops, you get a currency, you go to a vendor, and you buy the gear that you want. You make Mythic Plus gear have dungeon set bonuses that make the Mythic Plus gear the best in dungeons. You make raid gear have specific things for the raid, so the raiders are getting the best gear. You make PvP gear have PvP stats, so the PvPers have the best PvP gear, and they don't need to finish the last boss in a mythic raid to get a trinket to do arena. It just, I don't know, for me, That makes sense. That seems like a smart way to do things. I know there's this massive push, and you may agree with it. There's this massive push to get everybody integrated into every single aspect of the game. Is that needed? And if that is needed, do we need these systems that underpin them, like covenants and things like that, to be a part of it? So that's going to lead me into the last sort of big point I want to make. And I know I've been talking for a while, but I got a lot of stuff inside. Borrowed power and convoluted systems. All right, this is where I was going to attempt to tie it all into where has it all changed. So in Classic and TBC, we didn't really have any bullshit systems. We had the player, we had the class, we had the spec, we had talents, and we had gear. And then we had things like attunements and resistance factors, which, if I'm honest, I don't mind any of those extensions encounters. I think that was really good. That was pretty much it. The core function of the game was your character, was your gear, and then the content that you were doing. TBC didn't really alter this. Dual crafting came in, we got gem slots, the rep factors increased slightly where you had to get revered to do heroic dungeons. You had to do your attunements. We got the badges of justice, which were a great addition to the game. You got to farm a currency, you got to get a piece of gear. Reward for doing something. Cool beans. Now fast forward into the future, we saw more systems introduced to the game and add reshine to it. We got reforging, which I liked. New secondary stats in WoD, multi-strike, bonus armor, versatility. We had vengeance. We had, I can't remember what the other one was that made tanks do insane damage and healing. We had the artifact system. We had warforging, titan forging. We had legendaries, corruption, Azerite, all the way up to covenants now. And if I've missed anything, I'm sorry. I'm sure you'll tell me in the comments. So it kind of feels like if we were to group World of Warcraft expansions, it kind of feels like vanilla TBC and Wrath of the Lich King were all cut from the same cloth. They had a similar design of gameplay in mind and how it was supposed to develop and evolve. And I think they really nailed each step of those developments as the game improved. And then if you move on, I feel like Kata, MOP, and WoD had their own other piece of cloth that they were cut from. Again, we evolved more around class design here. Raid encounters took another step up in difficulty. They revamped dungeon development where we saw challenge modes in MOP and WoD. The dungeons were harder in Kata as just a base level. And then they progressed. And again, they all felt like they were from the same sort of timeline in regards to progression. And then we hit Legion, BFA, and Shadowlands. And that's this real introductory of borrowed power systems. Now, Legion was absolutely amazing. I am not shitting on Legion, okay? Legion was amazing. Legendary acquisition aside, which was terrible at the start, was bad. But the X-Pack itself was killer. But if we're grouping them, that's how they really feel. So it feels like we've just stepped up into this borrowed power system area. And it's killing my WoW vibe. The problem for me is it feels like each expansion from this point, Blizzard feels this need to somehow outdo their last system. Like we have to make it bigger and better and more difficult, and it has to have more bits, and it has to have a spoiler and wings and speed holes. Like it feels like the focus has gone so far away from spec playability, enjoyment, meaningful choice, and just playing the content as players to being all about these systems and can we one up the last one. And I don't feel it's where the focus should be. Now, I get it. So before you throw something at me, a lot of what I've gone on about here is, really character-centric and progression-based gearing, okay? And I know there are loads more areas in this game now, pet battles, mount collecting, achievement points, gold making, transmog farming, speed running, speed leveling. I know there are lots of avenues that you can progress down in this game, and I am very narrowly treading on one. But, aside from all of those, I still just don't see a need for these systems. Even as a transmog collector, I don't think you would like being tied to a covenant and having to swap and grind out every single aspect of a covenant's renown and do everything else at the side to collect your transmog sets or a mount collector and things like that. I just think the Covenant system's been a pretty big letdown, and I think being tied to an element that has borrowed power has never been a great idea in an MMO. Conduit energy does not feel like it inspires any kind of choice. It just feels like it limits choice. Blizzard then from all this, have a huge reluctancy to make any change because they've pinned a whole expansion around a system instead of players playing their classes and playing the content. We also now have a new issue that's come up this morning of legendaries in 9.1 with the domination gear that's coming out as well. And I'm just talking specifically to what I know, which is Blood DK. Our best legendary is Super Strain. Domination gear is going to take up every slot aside from a neck. So you would think, okay, I'll go and recraft Super Strain on my neck. But then out of the mega dungeon, there's a new neck that procs 173 secondary stat, I think it is, on a 40% uptime, which is going to be better than Super Strain. So that means that you're going to have to go and craft like a ring legendary with Vampiric Aura on it, which is dog shit, because that's the only spot you can put an orange. And I already earned my legendaries in a chest or a shoulder spot, but because domination sockets are going to overrule them, then I have to recraft what I already earned. Not a great feeling. And I'm not trying to, I really didn't want to turn this into a bash on retail thing, because I still love the game. I still love Blizzard, but that's not a great feeling. It feels like a mess. And again, hailing back to that classic era, you just had your player class spec gear, and that was it. You had leveling was its own experience, and then you got to the max level and you had the game, and that was a whole other experience. It just feels like we've really lost that connection. And don't get me wrong, retail, fluidity of playing your class feels great. The game looks great. I would just love us to get back to some of those old style roots. And a shining memory that comes in my mind is BFA post season 4. A lot of people love doing keys. Post season 4, there was no corruption. Azerite traits had been disabled, I think. You were just playing your class in the dungeons and doing the content, and it was amazing. It was such a good feeling. And I remember so many people saying, I am having a blast because there's no borrowed power. I'm just playing my class in the content that Blizzard designed, and I love it. So that's pretty much it. I know I've waffled on, but it's been like sitting inside me, and I've been going on about it on stream a lot. We've been having a lot of great discussions on stream, and I wanted to just make a video on it. I would love to see, I feel like Blizzard in revisiting TBC, has been a great call from the community. They've acknowledged that. I just feel like you need to take this TBC piece of bread and take this Shadowlands piece of bread and just fucking squish it in the middle. Just make a fucking timeline sandwich and meat in the middle. Bring it back. Get rid of these systems. Bring it back to simplification. Just let people play the classes and play the content. I think it could be cool. So if you made it this far, thanks for listening. If you've got any other thoughts, drop them in the comments below. Otherwise, that's just where I'm at the moment. I'll still be playing 9.1, of course. I'll still be on there on the Blood DK, but I'm going to spend a lot of time on TBC as well because I'm just enjoying that at the moment. Thanks very much for watching anyway, guys. Like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you all next time. Bye.